This is CBN NewsWatch.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm George Thomas. We begin overseas, where Pope Francis has opened a high-stakes abuse prevention summit in Rome, hoping to help Catholics around the world better protect children. He's also calling for specific measures to handle accusations against bishops. Our Heather Sells is in the newsroom now with more. Heather, what are the hopes for this event?
George, the aim is to show that abusive priests are a worldwide problem and require the worldwide Catholic Church to respond. The four-day summit comes after literally decades of the Church coming to grips with the problem. It first emerged 30 years ago in Ireland and Australia and 20 years ago in the U.S. 190 bishops and religious superiors from around the world are attending. Already today, they have heard videotaped testimony from victims about their abuse by clergy and the cruel indifference that religious superiors showed to them. The Vatican's lead sex crimes investigator told the bishops that they must prevent pedophiles from entering the priesthood, protect their flocks from abusive priests, and investigate sex crimes. That point was echoed at a press conference put on by clergy abuse victims, including Mark Rotzi, a Pennsylvania lawmaker who was abused as a child.
What the Catholic Church, the Catholic Conference, the bishops, the cardinals, the Pope, what they are doing, they are blocking justice for all victims of sexual abuse. And that is a crime. These victims, they deserve their day in court. They want to be heard, they want truth, they want justice, they want to start healing. As I said earlier, nothing will ever make this right. Nothing. I go to bed at night, I think about it. Every time I go into the shower, I think about being raped.
George, really tough comments on a really tough and painful issue. The Pope has issued 21 proposals dealing with clergy sex abuse. They include everything from establishing rules for transferring seminarians and priests and a handbook that shows bishops how to investigate cases. Yeah,
very, very tough and very forthright comments there. Heather, I'm curious, the Pope himself has admitted to making mistakes on this issue, right?
Last year, he said he made, quote, grave errors in how he handled Chile's sex abuse scandal, and he actually invited the victims he had discredited to Rome to ask their forgiveness.
Yeah, okay. Heather, stand by for a second. I'm joined right now on the phone by J.D. Flynn, the editor-in-chief of the Catholic News Agency. J.D., let me begin with you, sir. I understand this summit will not produce a final document, so what are Catholics around the world hoping that it will produce?
Well, the hope is that the summit will catalyze bishops, especially in the developing world, to develop the kind of child protection policies that the U.S. bishops introduced for the Catholic Church in 2002. So while the U.S. Church has been working for the past 2 decades to develop safe environment policies, in many parts of the world that has not yet happened. And so the immediate hope is that this summit will catalyze that process in many places.
Yeah, Heather, to you, there does seem to be some consensus that U.S. Catholics are farther ahead in dealing with this crisis than their global counterparts. What do you think is the next step here for reform on this issue here in the U.S.?
Well, that's right. I think U.S. Catholics have a different outlook on this summit, and I think they have lower expectations, if you will. Really, in the U.S., it's all about the bishops and what are they going to do next on this issue. And I'd like to toss it back to you, J.D. What do you see the bishops in the U.S., what is their collective resolve on this issue right now?
U.S. Catholics have been concerned in recent months about coercive sexual activity involving adults. Theodore McCarrick comes most notably to mind, who was engaged in sexual coercion with seminarians and young priests. Those kinds of things are what U.S. Catholics are paying attention to. And so they're looking for bishops to develop whistleblower policies that hold bishops themselves accountable to oversight, either for malfeasance or negligence, to kind of answer the questions that have arisen through the McCarrick scandal about how such a prominent churchman could have been engaged in such profound sexual deviance for so long without intervention.
Yeah. J.D., you have written extensively on this subject for the Catholic News Agency. You know, some have called this a credibility crisis for the Pope and the Catholic leadership. Do you see it that way?
I think that it's certainly true that the Pope and the bishops of the United States have a lot at stake here because, of course, the mission of the church is the mission of the gospel, but so much of pastoral care is connected to trust, and I think it's so critically important for them right now to reestablish themselves as trustworthy leaders, and that's what U.S. Catholics are looking for. Can the Pope and can U.S. bishops be trusted to handle these matters with justice and with integrity?
Yeah. No, JD, just briefly, we've been covering this in the evangelical world now, which is kind of catching up to the Catholic world, if you will. Do you have any suggestions for evangelicals as perhaps they take a playbook from the Catholic Church on this issue?
I think that's a great question because I think it's not only something that affects churches, but any large institution. Public schools, of course, are a place where sexual abuse is a real issue, and prisons and other institutions too. And there are things that can be learned from the Catholic Church, most especially, I think, just creating a culture where any instance of abuse, any suspicion of abuse, is reported and dealt with forthrightly. And that has certainly happened with regard, I think, for the most part, to the protection of children. And what U.S. Catholics are looking for now is to expand it to other kinds of sexual misconduct.
Okay, terrific. We will need to leave it there. J.D. Flynn, Editor-in-Chief with the Catholic News Agency, and our very own Heather Sells in the newsroom. Folks, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, moving on. And as the summit kicks off in Rome, activists in Poland are taking matters into their own hands. Protesters pulled down a statue of a priest accused of sexually abusing minors. You see the video there. It shows three men attaching a rope around the statue of a late Polish Roman Catholic priest and pulling it down. The men then placed children's undergarments on the statue, which they say was to symbolize the suffering of all children at the hands of priests. According to police, the three protesters have been arrested and are now under investigation. Jussie Smollett has turned himself in. The actor is now facing a felony charge for filing a false police report. Smollett claimed to be a victim of a hate crime by two Trump supporters. For weeks, the Empire star claimed the men yelled racist and homophobic slurs, beat him, then hung a noose around his neck. Now the men say they were paid by Smollett to stage the alleged attack.
Smollett attempted to gain attention by sending a false letter that relied on racial, homophobic, and political language. When that didn't work, Smollett paid $3,500 to stage this attack.
If convicted, Smollett could spend up to 3 years behind bars. He also faces substantial fines. Some students at State University New York Oswego are receiving death threats for supporting Trump's border wall. The students with Young Americans for Freedom set up a table openly displaying their feelings about tighter border security. That's when they started receiving threatening tweets. One said, quote, "Whichever one made the sublime posters is getting 25 to 27 bullets." Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, Campus Reform's Emma Michel said, unfortunately, the threatening response is not surprising.
The left has a clear pattern of violence against ideas that they disagree with. And this is unfortunate to see because that's not rhetoric that should be accepted in the adult world, and it certainly shouldn't be accepted on campus among students who are learning to form their worldview.
The university president released a statement condemning the threatening tweets. You can find out more from Campus Reform's Emma Michel tonight on our Global Lane program at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, only on the CBN News channel. And today on CBN's Faith Nation, pro-life heart bills are working through multiple state legislatures. They ban abortion after a heartbeat is detected in the unborn baby. We'll have the latest on where they stand and speak with the head of Students for Life. That's on Faith Nation tonight, only on the CBN News channel. The American woman who went to Syria to become an ISIS bride will not be allowed to return to the United States. Horda Mathuna said she wants to come back to this country. Trump tweeted Wednesday, writing, "I have instructed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and he fully agrees not to allow her back in the country." The State Department argues she is not a U.S. citizen, a claim her family's attorney dispute. Mathuna says she was radicalized online and ran away to join ISIS back in 2015. Meanwhile, Britain is also banning an ISIS bride from returning to that country. With the crisis in Venezuela not slowing down anytime soon, U.S. officials have announced that Vice President Mike Pence will be going to Colombia to demand Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to step down. Pence will meet with the Colombian president and regional leaders Monday in an effort to rally the international community behind opposition leader Juan Guaido. The U.S. and 60 other nations have recognized Guaido as interim president. An Israeli firm plans to enter the space race tomorrow. The company known as SpaceX launches the first ever private spacecraft to land on the moon. CBN's Chris Mitchell brings us the story from Jerusalem.
The spacecraft is called Bereshit, a reference to the words "in the beginning" from Genesis. While only about the size of a washing machine, its mission is out of this world. After launching from Cape Canaveral, the plan will include several lunar orbits before making a soft landing on the moon's surface.
Actually, the spacecraft will be assembled on the launcher, and here in Israel, the control room and the teams are at the last stage of readiness for the launch.
The 40-day voyage culminates with a landing scheduled for April 11th. It will then send back video and high-resolution pictures and perform experiments. The mission has two goals. One is called the Apollo effect, hoping to inspire the next generation.
We want the Israeli kids and the Israeli youth, we want to encourage them to learn STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and we hope that the mission will create the effect and encourage them. The second goal is to promote the space industry here in Israel. I think we got it. One of the goals is already achieved.
And Tebow says SpaceIL wants to show a small country with a small budget can join the prestigious moon landing club of the U.S., Russia, and China. Israeli President Reuven Rivlin calls the venture Zionism at its finest. The spacecraft is also bringing a time capsule, including a miniature copy of the Bible, along with Israeli national symbols, including the saying, Am Israel High, the people of Israel live. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Big day for Israel tomorrow. You can go to cbnnews.com for a link to watch the launch tomorrow. Up next, the massive protests that changed the political and spiritual landscape of Ukraine.
CBN presents The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
We're going to talk about some of the incredible promises God has made to His children.
In Pat Robertson's newest teaching, you'll discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation, and see amazing stories of God's promises in action.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Break free from stress and despair.
The Lord doesn't want you to live in fear, but to know the rewards given to those who love God.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com. The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Welcome back to the CBN News channel. 5 years ago today, violent protests and killings rocked Ukraine's capital city as demonstrators took to the streets demanding political change. I was there in Kyiv as tens of thousands of protesters faced off with Ukrainian authorities on Maidan Square in the heart of the capital city. It was a very dangerous period for the country. Ukraine had gained independence from Russia 23 years earlier, and half the country wanted much closer ties with Russia. The other half wanted better relations with the West. The protests spread to scores of cities, threatening to tear the country apart. It eventually forced Ukraine's then president, you see him there on the left, he had to flee the country. Russia also got involved, sending troops into the strategic port city of Crimea. CBN News was there the day Russia invaded Crimea. This week, Ukrainians are remembering the tragic events of the Maidan protests. Someone who experienced those tumultuous times firsthand was Steve Weber, head of CBN's office in Ukraine. Steve, thanks for coming on the show. Steve, can you describe those weeks of protests 5 years ago and what impact did it have on the country?
Well, it was devastating, and particularly the days when the shooting started to happen. And most people don't remember, but these were sharpshooters, and there were over 100 people who lost their lives with a bullet right through their head. And unfortunately, since then, there hasn't been one person brought to justice in the 5 years hence. But you know, one thing that you know now is that revolutions have a very unpredictable future. And so that has definitely changed the face of Ukraine.
Steve, did the spiritual landscape of Ukraine change as a result of the crisis?
Well, I think when there's uncertainty, there's always a hunger for God to ask him, why are these things happening? And then our relationship to them. Maidan started something, but most recently, when Patriarch Bartholomew undid over 300 years of Orthodox history, and now the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is under Constantinople and not under the Moscow Patriarch, those are seismic changes in the spiritual landscape. And yes, there is spiritual hunger today like never before.
In fact, when you and I were out on the streets, evangelicals were handing out, gospel tracts, and they were right in the middle of all this. 5 years later, Russia, as you know, still controls Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine. Does President Putin see Ukraine as part of Russia's orbit?
Unfortunately, he still feels this way. And after this division and separation from the Moscow Patriarch, both Patriarch Kirill and President Putin have expressed strong displeasure and strong anger about this. And so, as most people might know, maybe they won't, but we have elections in about 35 days. And there is a tension in the city right now, knowing that if anyone tries to take authority and there's chaos, the troops are all along the border. The Russian troops are along the border, and we just need to prevent an incident that would justify further intervention.
CBN is still doing a lot of humanitarian work in the eastern part of Ukraine. Tell us real quickly about those efforts, even now, 5 years later.
Well, even 5 years later, there are still shelling going on, and people are losing their life along the front road. But CBN, we have been there. We have been constantly there. We have been the recipients of major grants, and we are continuing to distribute bread into the villages. We have also started about 50 different churches along the front line. And so wherever there's chaos, God has people there to meet the spiritual hunger. And that is what CBN is doing along with the physical aid.
Okay, terrific. Steve Weber, a good man based out of Ukraine. Thank you so much for all you do, and we continue to pray for the nation of Ukraine.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Coming up, Billy Graham died 1 year ago today. We'll bring you a look at a museum that's dedicated to his life and legacy.
Parents, the Superbook Bible app is a great way to get your child reading the Bible, because in today's busy world, we can use some help. The free Superbook Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible. playing great games,
Did you win?
watching cool videos, discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available now.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I wills of God, the latest teaching from Pat Robertson.
Today marks 1 year. Welcome back to CBN News Channel. Today marks 1 year since Billy Graham passed away. Graham's ministry transformed America's religious landscape and changed the lives of hundreds of millions around the world. Charlene Aaron tells us about a museum dedicated to Graham's life and legacy.
The Billy Graham Museum, located on the campus of Wheaton College, highlights the mission and the work of the man known as America's pastor. When presented with the idea of a museum dedicated in his honor, Billy Graham wanted to make sure it wasn't just about him.
Mr. Graham wanted a place for his papers, and then there was also a conversation about what a museum might be like that sort of points to the ministry of Mr. Graham, but more broadly to the ministry of American evangelism. So this is a Museum of American Evangelism.
The museum is part of the Billy Graham Center at Wheaton, where Graham graduated in 1943. And is dedicated to developing and mobilizing Christians for evangelism.
Billy Graham is the most famous graduate of Wheaton College. Billy and Ruth attended here as students, met here, got married. So having the Billy Graham Center here on campus is a visible and spiritual reminder to our students that we make much of Jesus here. Billy Graham made much of Jesus here. We want them to make much of Jesus as they go from this place.
Opened in 1981, the museum includes depictions of early evangelists, such as the Apostle Paul, John Wycliffe, and Martin Luther. A section devoted to Graham includes portraits and memorabilia from the personal life of the evangelist. Highlights from Graham's years of ministry, such as his numerous evangelistic crusades, are also on display. Administrators say the goal of the museum extends beyond Graham.
The purpose is really to point people ultimately to Jesus, is to help people to see how they might respond by sharing the gospel.
Many who visit do respond.
People come to Christ here, so we actually have a response. People can fill out a response card. We follow them up.
Since Graham's passing, even more want to know about the man who shared the gospel to nearly 215 million people in more than 185 countries.
People are interested, and it's interesting how many non-Christians come. So Billy Graham was a singularly important figure in the history of the world. And so people know that name. We want them to also know the name that's above every name that Billy Graham pointed to, the name of Jesus.
Stetzer says that sums up the message of the museum and the man it honors.
You go through the cross, you receive Jesus as Savior and Lord, then eternal life is a gift that comes from God. We actually continue to see here. So in a sense, this museum is an ongoing crusade.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News, Wheaton, Illinois.
Coming up, how famous baseball player Tim Tebow uses his faith to beat criticism. We'll have that story next.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort,
the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
And welcome back. Professional baseball player Tim Tebow's recent interview has gone viral, and for a good reason. Tebow sat down with media during the New York Mets spring training on Saturday, and he gave some inspirational words when asked how he deals with critics who say he won't succeed. Tebow says he turns to what he knows best, his faith.
There's one thing that defines me, and that's what God says about me. And besides that, I get to go live out my dreams and try to help as many people along the way as possible.
The video garnered over 4 million views online. And this programming note, don't forget to check out our CBN News Daily Rundown podcast, which deals with a key story in the news every day. That's our CBN News Daily Rundown podcast with Caitlin Burke. Go to cbnnews.com and click on the show tab to find the Daily Rundown page where you can listen. Please listen and subscribe. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. Also, a reminder, you can contact us anytime. Email us at newswatch@cbn.com. Share your comments. Send us a story, idea or so to all of us. Or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Well, folks, that is it for this edition of the CBN News Channel show. I hope you have a fantastic day. And remember, God bless you.